for several decades, Arizona has seen about 200 deaths. Now, you have to understand that these are only the ones that are found. Again, our desert, our borderlands are like your ocean, and many, many more are never found.
This is the international law. You should be allowed to approach the border and ask for asylum there. And it's not happening.
Imagine how is it for children to be able to climb that kind of wall.
They die. They break their back, they break their legs, they break their ankles, they break their arms, they break their shoulders, and some of them make it a little way into the desert, and then they succumb. We find them there. You think, look how close they are to the wall. That's as far as they could make it with their injured bodies.
Welcome everyone to Fractured Podcast Season 4, Episode 4. Today our guests connect with us from Arizona in the US. We have James Holeman and Abby Carpenter, and they are working with Battalion Search and Rescue that was founded in 2020. They're doing an amazing job helping people cross the borders between the US and Mexico. Welcome with us, James and Abby.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's start with the name. I'm always interested in people naming the titles of the movie or a book. So can you tell us about why did you choose this name?
Okay, yeah, you have a lot of questions, and they're great questions, and I have to be careful not to talk too much.
No, it's
So
okay.
I'll
Take
try
your
to be
time.
quick.
Take your time.
So I heard about this St. Patrick's Battalion, or Battalion de San Patricios. And I was really inspired by this story, and so I took the name from that. I was in the military for some time, but it's not like from my military background so much. It's from this story of the St. Patrick's Battalion. They were Irish immigrants who came to the U.S. in like the 1840s when many Irish were coming, you know, and they joined. Many of them joined the military as a pathway to citizenship, but they were sent down to Texas, and they were told to fight against Mexico.
Oh,
they were Catholic. The Mexicans were Catholic. They thought this was unjust war, you know, this Mexican-American war, which it was. And it was like just stealing land, really. And so they said no. And several hundred of them jumped the river, and they joined with Mexico, and they fought against the U.S.
Wow. Amazing story.
Yeah, it's like some history you don't hear about. There's many details to it. They fought many battles against the U.S.
They should make a movie about it.
They fought very bravely, and then the end. Unfortunately, many were captured, and they hung them near Mexico City, like 50 in September 1847 or something like that. And this is the largest execution from the United States in history. We had some executions, terrible executions during the war with indigenous people, you know, the battles with indigenous people, the Indian wars, they call them. But this was more than any of those. They hung 50 over 3 days.
Oh my God.
Anyway, St. Patrick's Battalion, Irish fighters for Mexico.
Amazing.
So James and Abby, maybe you can share with us a little bit what is the mission of the battalion and how did it start, and like how, for example, how does your typical day look like? What do you exactly do? We are connecting here in Europe, and actually most of the topics in the podcast refer to the situation in Europe, situation of people on the move in Europe. So we are very, very curious about the situation at the US-Mexico border.
Gosh, I think our mission is to search for the lost but not forgotten, for migrants who are in distress or deceased. And generally, we were finding deceased migrants more than those in distress. James has been doing this in Arizona since 2020, and then together we've done it in New Mexico for the past year. You want to talk about how you started, Jaime?
Sure. I was kind of retiring. I had a small business, and I've always volunteered. We both have always volunteered doing different things, and I was looking for some volunteer opportunity here in Arizona, and I read about some people from San Diego that were coming over to Arizona and searching in the desert, for people that were missing. And I thought I could do this. I have these skills, and it checked many boxes for me. And so I started that in 2018. And I mean, right away, I saw so much terrible things. In Europe, you have your oceans, right? You have your Mediterranean Sea, and this is where migrants are disappearing. Here in the US, we have these deserts and we have these borderlands. And there is a lot of similarities, in the oceans, they disappear maybe very quickly. Here in the borderlands, it's a little bit slower, but they are still disappearing by the thousands. It's very undercounted and unknown and unreported. It's like this horrible experience, very similar to Europe.
I'll answer a little bit about what a typical day, well, I'd call it a typical search. And we plan these in advance, and we notify our regular searchers that this is coming up, and they let us know that they want to be a part of the search. And so on the day of, we'll go out, and it could be between 4 or 5 people up to maybe 12, and we'll separate into groups depending on how many we have. And we prepare ourselves the day of with our hiking poles, high visibility hats. We have radio so we can stay in contact. We have water. We have water for people we might find in distress. And then we form long lines where we're in contact through visual, but also through radio. And then we search in a grid pattern. So we're hiking together in a long line, maybe 5 people. We're looking down at our feet a little bit further out. We look to the right, to the left. We often turn around and look behind us. And we're looking primarily for bones. That's what we're going to find most of the time. And after a while, your eye it's a terrible thing to say, but my eye gets adapted. Your eye gets adapted to what to look for, what shapes, what colors, what places they might be, where migrants have crawled underneath shade on the north side to get away from that brutal sun, and then they'll die there. So we hike this pattern. When we find remains, we do 3 things. We identify the GPS point, specifically, exactly. We do several of those depending on where we are. We take high visibility tape and we tie it up as high as we can. Usually no trees in the desert, but high bushes so that we can mark the spots. And we take photos of the remains with forensic rulers so we can identify the size of the bones and stuff. And then depending on who we're with, we might take a moment of silence, of quiet, so that we can do what we need to do to take care of ourselves spiritually and emotionally. And then we continue on. We keep hiking. We might find more remains that day, or more and more remains. And then we do this grid pattern work. So that's what a typical search looks like.
You mentioned already what you need physically to do this operation. What kind of training or preparedness do you actually need for this? And I mean, both physically, I can only imagine that this is physically very, very, very exhausting, but also mentally. That probably takes it all as well.
Yeah. These different areas that we search present different challenges. Here in Arizona, our average distance is much farther than in New Mexico currently. There are other groups that do what we do, of course. Like the group I started with in 2018 from San Diego, and they are continuing to work, and other groups besides them and ours. And we take different approaches, I believe. Some of the groups are working like for a specific individual. They got some information about a person that was left behind, or maybe they have a GPS point and they're going out to this area to look for this one individual, you see. I have adopted a different approach where we are kind of focusing on very high traffic areas where a lot of people are crossing, you see. One of those areas is west of El Paso, Texas. It's in New Mexico, but it's just west of El Paso. It's a horrible scenario, a very strange like juxtaposition with community very close by and industry, and then this open desert where many people are dying, like over 200 in the last 2 years. Over half are women, which is unusual and unique to this area. 55% of the people deceased that are being found are women. This is shocking and unlike anywhere along the entire border. It is right across from Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, which has a very dark history of femicide, sex trafficking, this type of thing. So we've focused our efforts in New Mexico on that area, which is very accessible and relatively flat terrain. Okay. So there we can have people of different abilities. Over here in Arizona, it's very remote, and we are hiking many hours sometimes out into very remote areas. So our volunteers need to be a little bit more capable, you see. And yeah, I hope that answered that part. Mentally and yeah, that's physical. Mentally, wow, it can be very difficult. We are like citizens, right? We are just volunteers. Some of our volunteers are religious people, priests, ministers. Some are veterans like myself. I'm not a combat veteran. I was here in the U.S. during my service. Some are retirees, you know, like Abby worked in higher education, and all different types of people, some working in immigration, but we don't have like training to deal with what we see necessarily. And I've seen probably 200 sites now in 6 years with human remains, sometimes older skeletal bones, but sometimes the person just died hours ago, and everything in between. And it can be very difficult. And lately, actually, it's been extremely difficult with some of the government resistance and resentment of our work. And so very challenging, very, very challenging. We lean on each other and try to support each other, but we don't have training, and we don't have like this support network. We don't have this, budget, for counseling and this type of thing.
Yeah. I want to add one thing onto that. Many of these volunteers work with immigrants on both the U.S. side and the Mexico side, and it's challenging for them to then see these remains in the desert because they have personal relationships with people. I used to teach English as a second language. I did that for about 10 years, and the first day I went out in the desert, in my mind, I saw my students, all these footprints, these backpacks, their clothes. I just imagined how all my students crossed that way. All of them did. And how many of them didn't make it because that's how they had to enter the United States. It's an emotionally challenging thing to think about them as humans, not just immigrants.
I went through your website and I read that 2020 was the deadliest year for migrants in the state of Arizona. Why is that?
You know, that's probably because that's the last time I updated our website.
Mm-hmm.
Every year is a more deadly year.
Oh.
Every year is more deadly. I'll just give you some quick numbers here. For several decades, Arizona has seen about 200 deaths. Now, you have to understand that these are only the ones that are found. Again, our desert, our borderlands are like your ocean, and many, many more are never found. The desert consumes people very quickly. I believe it has been turned into a weapon. It has been weaponized, like the oceans and waterways in Europe. Migrants are pushed and forced to these deadly killing fields, if you will, you know, where they die in silence and they disappear quickly. And there is little or no effort to locate them, you see. So it's like a place to make this issue disappear, you know? And so many estimate in Arizona the real number is probably 5 times more than what is actually found. So if you say 200 are found in a year, the real number is closer to 1,000. Okay.
In one state.
This is in Arizona. Now, New Mexico has had an incredible increase in deaths, or maybe it's just because groups like us are working and finding more.
Yeah.
And, you know, so anyway, now New Mexico is at the same place that Arizona is. 200. Very close. Similar, probably 5 times more in reality. So another 1,000. Texas, wow. I believe it's like double of these other states. Very remote, very wild borderlands, a lot of private ranches where people can't even go and search and get access. People are just dying and they disappear. California. So I think if you add all 4 border states, you have an accurate estimation of around 5,000.
Oh my God.
Okay.
A year.
California, Arizona, New Mexico, 1,000 each. Texas, probably 2,000. 5,000, my friend.
Oh my
Every single year. But look, this is like death by design. Okay. This is death by design. We have these policies like prevention through deterrence that started in 1990s. And this made the borders stronger by the urban areas, forced migrants into the deserts, into these remote borderlands, okay? Funneled them into these killing fields, really. And it's still a policy today, you know? And we continue to militarize our border. We continue to demonize and dehumanize migrants, you know? This language, this rhetoric is all part of the system of killing and of looking away, you know, of ignoring the deaths. And so it's a massive, I think, complicated process of a slow motion genocide, really. I mean, if you look at the definition of genocide, there's 5 categories. I think we cover 4, you know, so this is like, you know, a 1 here, 2 there, 3 there, 4 here, every day, every single day in our borderlands.
James, I'm very happy that you went into prevention through deterrence, because I think like people in Europe here really know very little about this. So I would like to combine those two questions. So if you could explain a little bit more, what does it mean, the prevention through deterrence policy? Like, how did it actually happen that people are forced through those deadly channels or bottlenecks? And the second question here would be, can you please describe to us the conditions at the border, this gigantic long border, meaning the crossing? How does it look like from a perspective of a person who wants to cross? How long does it take? What are the real dangers there at the desert? I mean, we can imagine many of them, but if you could name the most common one, and the causes of death, is it dehydration? Is it just exhaustion? If you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Prevention through deterrence.
Yeah. So this was a policy in 1994 put through by Bill Clinton, President Bill Clinton, a Democrat. And it was supposed to be two-pronged, and one prong was to strengthen the border and to close the easier border crossings along cities, so El Paso, Nogales, San Diego, and force them through more hostile terrain. Before we go into that, the second prong was supposed to be revamping the immigration system. So here we are 30 years later, and all they've done is strengthen the border. They haven't done anything in 30 years to change, to address the immigration policies, to how people can legally migrate in through asylum and through migration. And Jaime, do you want to talk a little bit more about that? You have some terminology on the prevention through deterrence, how when they designed it, they knew it was going to kill migrants. That was part of it.
Yeah, this was part of the language. Now, please understand, we're not policy experts. We hike in the desert and we do this more physical work, but you can't help but absorb this information as we have done this work. And I just want to also mention that yes, there is deadly language within this policy. They call this these areas hostile terrain within the policy, and there would be mortalities. So they knew it would kill people. And it is not a deterrent. People are desperate. People are migrating. They need to migrate. This is a natural phenomenon, migration. It's been turned into this evil thing, but it's not evil. It's beautiful. It's an act of love. It's an act of desperation often. But it has been demonized and criminalized by both Republicans and Democrats here in the U.S. You see, both parties use migrants and immigration as a tool to get elected. Clinton, Obama, all of them. Some are just more obvious about it, and more overt about it. Obama was known as the deporter in chief.
Yeah.
He deported more people than anybody in history. I mean, yes, we have our preferences of who would get elected, but it's sometimes the lesser of two evils, really, birds of a different feather. So they're both using migration and immigrants as a tool to get elected and participate in this rhetoric, in this language that kills people. It kills people. Also, I just wanted to mention, look, a lot more, the majority of this is about money. Militarization of the border is about money. It's about government contracts. It's about having this bloated agency, our Border Patrol, that is the largest law enforcement agency in our country now. And yes, we have this 2,000-3,000 mile long border that we're putting up this metal barrier, which is a joke. It's ridiculous. It's insane. And it doesn't stop people. You build a 30-foot ladder or a 30-foot wall, you build a 30-foot ladder. You cut through it, you go under it. It doesn't stop people. It's so vast, the borderlands. It just drives people into these really desolate areas that are oceans. They're oceans, in the desert. And you drowned in the water, you succumb and you die in the desert. And I also want to say that, this is not the only place people are dying. Thousands and thousands of people are dying on their journey before they reach the U.S. border, going through the Darien Gap, in Central America, riding the beast, the bestia, the train through Mexico, where people are robbed, extorted, killed. They fall, they lose their limbs, they die. It's horrific, or they die like, just on the other side. Yeah, we've created this big spoiled baby of a country. The USA has created. We were built on the backs of slaves, right? And we continue to survive on the backs of poor and vulnerable people.
I'll talk a little bit about the dangers of the crossing. It's the 30-foot wall, and I'm not afraid of heights. I was raised by a carpenter. I'm on the roof all the time. That wall is intimidating. It's 30 feet up, and there are these metal poles with gaps between them. And how people are crossing them that we've seen is a rope ladder with PVC rungs. It's only about this wide, and you have to climb up that thing and go over the top. That's the hard part. You're not just done when you get up 30 feet. You have to cross over, and it's narrow and it hurts. And you have to go over the top of that and go down another ladder. And many people fall on both sides, and they die. They break their back, they break their legs, they break their ankles, they break their arms, they break their shoulders. And some of them make it a little way into the desert, and then they succumb. We find them there. You think, look how close they are to the wall. That's as far as they could make it with their injured bodies. Another incredible danger is it's incredibly dry. There's no source of water. How much water can you carry up and over that wall? Yeah. You have 30 feet to go, and you have to bring your water up and over, and then hike for miles and miles and miles and miles. There's the two migrant mortality maps, one for Arizona and one for New Mexico. And it's red dots. And if you click on a red dot, it'll open up and it'll tell you all the information they have about that person who died. They have the name, it's there, the sex, the age, how long they were when they were found, skeletal remains, less than a day, mild decomposition, and how they died. And so you can do your own research on that. A person could. It's public information. Many, many people die from exposure. So they've died from not drinking enough water. They die from hypothermia. There's heart attacks, gunshot wounds, blunt force trauma, incredible amount of ways to die in the desert.
Yeah, because we've weaponized the border so much. People used to cross in the past by themselves to do seasonal work and then return, but now we've militarized it and made it so dangerous to cross. It's really empowered and enriched cartels and criminal agencies, that have monetized migrants. See, this wasn't the case in the past, but now you have to pay. You have to pay. Everybody has to pay. And if you don't pay, you will be killed. They will shoot you. If you attempt to cross without paying, young, old, male, female, you must pay. every migrant has a price on their head.
You mentioned all those dangers that people face crossing the borders, and I can't imagine how is it for children to be able to climb that kind of wall. Really, that's for me that's really shocking. So, do you find remains of children? How is it for children there? The situation when they cross with their parents.
Wow. Yeah, I have to say that maybe I don't think I have found remains of children, and I'm very grateful for that. You know, I have heard stories of other groups. Oh, it's hard to talk about. They found a child, a young girl, and she had braces, on her teeth, and her nails were painted, and this affected some men in that group, and they said, "I'm finished. I cannot do this work anymore." I would have been on that search also because I was working with that group at that time. This was some years ago, but my mother passed away in 2020, and so I didn't attend that group, that search. Anyway, sorry, too much information maybe, but
No, no, it's okay. It's fine.
how it is for children, I don't know. I can't imagine. You see, we have different kind of scenarios where people are crossing the border, and at different times. Some people are crossing and trying to get to the city or somewhere, to get work and get picked up or whatever, to be with their family. Um, some are coming and trying to present themselves for asylum, you see. So Trump was in office previously, and he closed this asylum, option. And then, so you had all these people that were building up, waiting. And then when Biden came and he allowed it somewhat, many people were crossing and then presenting themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They were not trying to go hike through the desert, you see.
They were just trying to put their foot on American soil, and then the Border Patrol would pick them up, and then they could present for asylum. But they had to be on U.S. soil.
Yeah. So I think that I don't know. I have to be careful about I don't have expertise in every area, so I don't know about children.
Guys, just as you work as a battalion, you have people who believe in the same values as you, and do this work voluntarily. I was wondering if there is something that is your opposition, because this is what we have here in Europe. We have people who help at borders, and we have people who are so-called border hunters, which means they hunt people to stop them from entering their country. They strongly believe that they're fulfilling their patriotic duty and stopping bad people, stopping criminals from entering. So I was wondering if something like this exists also in the US.
We have a somewhat similar group. We call them militia. And they are citizens who also believe they are protecting the United States. Fortunately, they are not at this point where we do our searches, so we don't come in contact with. I have seen them when I was working with those asylum groups coming across. So I don't have any personal experience with them. I've heard many horrible stories about what they do with how they lie to the migrants, but I haven't had any personal experience.
Yeah, and nor have I, thankfully. I sometimes they are projecting themselves as military people. They are wearing camouflage. They are carrying like automatic weapons. We have like these,
United States.
U.S. gun laws are very loose, And yeah, they're out there looking like the military, and even sometimes using the name of the military, like calling themselves veterans, something, something, and maybe they're not even veterans, So it's like, it's not very honorable to me. I see it as they're hunting, like, often women and children and people that are vulnerable, like they have drunk the Kool-Aid, as we say. They are believing this narrative of migrants are stealing jobs and they are bringing crime and stuff like that. Migrants um, uh, they bring jobs to the U.S. They help the economy. They build our houses, many times, and they commit a fraction of crime compared to U.S. citizens. Look in the news. Who is going to these schools and shooting children? It's American citizens, people like with white skin are doing this, not migrants. So, but this is all part of that language, that dehumanizing language that, and fear that these politicians are using, and to make people believe in them, in their campaign, so they can get elected, and yeah, frighten them. And anyway, I could go on, but yeah, we have them also, unfortunately.
James, do you remember Petra Molnar? She wrote the book The Walls Have Eyes. She was with you
Yes,
one
I
time.
remember Petra. Yeah,
Yeah,
she's a good friend.
yeah, she was with you.
She said I talk too much.
We had her on the podcast. It was amazing, and she talked about when she met you and visited the memorial of Elias Alvarado. Can you maybe tell us about his case and who found him?
Yeah. Yeah, this was a very early search for my group, for the battalion. I believe it was in 2020 when we first started. We had teamed up with another group called the Armadillos, and they're from San Diego, and I'm still in contact with them, And yeah, we hiked 15 miles that day, in one day. And we found several locations. It was north of here, and we were almost finished for the day. We had 1 mile to go, and we were almost to the trucks, and people are tired, and they start to follow each other and start talking. And I said, listen, keep searching, keep looking. I know we're almost done, but you never know. You never know. So spread out, keep looking. And right after I said that, this man from the Armadillos, he said, Jaime, they call me Jaime. He said, there's a body over here. And yeah, this was a man who died. He was communicating with his wife in, I apologize, I don't remember the specific country right now, Central America, in the summer of 2020, and she lost contact with him. He wasn't communicating anymore, and he died in the desert. He was left behind. You could see like the blisters on his feet, where the skin was gone. And yeah, he had traveled many miles. He had traveled many miles, like maybe 65 miles, and he was like 3 miles from the highway. You could see the trucks, and we don't know what happened to him, but it was sad. And my friend Cesar and his organization contacted his wife and communicated with him, because honestly, we don't have a lot of confidence sometimes in our government agencies for making this connection with the family and, identifying, and it's challenging. And uh, she talked about her husband, and she said that he was desperate. They had children, and he needed to find work and make money, and so he left his country, his family, his language, his culture to help his family, and he didn't make it. She sent a recording, I recall, of her and her son, and we went back to that location and we played. Yeah, the recording, and I remember, and yeah, we put a cross. My friend Cesar put a cross for him. So when Petra and her colleagues came, it was accessible, because it was so close to where we parked. We could go and see if the cross was still there, and it was gone because it was by like in a wash, like we call them arroyo, and a seasonal wash. When the rain comes, and so I said, let's go walk down the wash a little ways and see if we can find the cross. And we found it. We found it. It was in some brush, and the water had come and pushed it away. So we got it out, and we went back, and I put it back in a little bit higher up. Yeah. Anyway, these are very difficult cases. The desert strips away the humanity, you see, the flesh, and we are often finding skeletal remains. I think it is like a little bit easier for us, to be honest. I'm sorry, but I think it's a little bit easier how could we go and find like bodies like every month? Like in September in New Mexico, we found 6 separate sites with bones and identification and remains in 6 hours with only like 7 people walking. These areas where we are searching, much of the borderland, it is an open graveyard.
I have to ask you, are you finding more dead or alive people in the desert?
Deceased. Many, many more. Migrants are hiding, they're hiding, they're frightened, they're hiding. And it's very rare that we encounter somebody alive. It's very rare. And when we do, we just have to kind of assess the situation. Sometimes we have to make the decision for them. They are like not coherent, but this is very, very rare, very rare. But I will tell you that, I know our name is Search and Rescue, right? I believe when we find these remains, when we find these individuals, this is a rescue because they are disappearing very quickly. They're being scattered. They're eaten by animals. Come on. This is the reality. We are hunting. Our government is hunting people, hunting human beings, and then leaving them, abandoning them, and they are eaten by animals and consumed by the environment. So when we find a person, even their bones, I believe this is a rescue. There is an opportunity there for them to be identified and go home to their family and receive a proper burial, receive some dignity.
Yeah. I would very much agree with you. We made this movie called Even After Death, which is about what is happening here in Greece when a body is being found, usually washed off the shores of the Mediterranean, and what is the process further. And we cooperated on this movie with the Last Rights Project and Missing Migrant Project, and they all strongly believe And it is actually in their mission that this is the last right of every person to be identified and buried, to be buried with the name, right? To not be anonymous somewhere very far away. And this is what they are trying to do when, in cooperation with many partners, to find the way to, first of all, identify people and then give the family an information, right? And they told us so many times, and as well, a coroner in Evros River, this is the north of Greece, where you can cross this very tiny land border, let's call it, but it's a river. The coroner there was telling us how precious this is for the families, that they know that they can have the closure, that the person has been identified and they know what happened to them, right?
Yeah.
So I absolutely agree with you on this issue. But I wanted also to ask you specifically, when you when you find remains, do you notify the authorities about this? Because I was wondering also about the numbers you gave us at the beginning. Where does those are official numbers, of course, as you said, and I don't think so much of them come strictly from the search of the government. Those numbers, do they come from you? Do you notify the authorities that you found the remains? And if so, are they doing something about this as well?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll start this. When we find the remains, we do those three things. We do the GPS point, we take photos, and we mark the area with high visibility tape. And then later we complete a report that has the battalion's name, my name, email, phone number. It has those GPS points of what we located, has a very clear description of how to get to it. This miles from this road, what we found as far as remains, and then other things like a cell phone, a backpack, toothbrush. And then we call the local authority, whoever it might be, and usually it's the sheriff of that county. And this is in the ideal situation. They give us an email address, and we email that report and pictures that we've taken. And then we copy the office of the medical investigator or the examiner, depending on which state we're in. And then they're tasked with going out and collecting those remains. It's generally worked like that. For years, it's worked like that. But recently, in a certain county right next to Texas, in Doña Ana County, New Mexico, in the last 2 months, the sheriff and the deputies have, I guess the word is refused. They have refused to come out to the sites and collect the remains. And we've gone back to these sites and the remains are still there. It's hard to even imagine what they could be thinking, that they would leave human remains that have been identified in the desert. They have ID, all kinds of bones. They have clothes. They're left.
Yeah. So I've been doing this work in Arizona for 6 years. And the thing about Arizona is that it's really remote. And sometimes we have to hike many, many hours and miles to get to these deep parts of the desert. So we can't really go back and check, right? We've checked on a few over the years, or I have, and sometimes they're still there also. And so we had to call them again and say, hey, you know, what's going on? Or they didn't collect everything. So this isn't exclusive to New Mexico or Texas. But it's a problem. This is part of the deprioritizing, or, you know, like under uneven uneven use of resources. You see, if you're a tourist or you're a U.S. citizen and you get lost in the Grand Canyon, or, you know, on some hiking trail, you know, they bring out helicopters and everything, and, oh, we have to find this person, right? Yeah. But if you're a migrant and you are lost in the desert, there's levels of
Response.
of like, of like reducing the response. For one, in many areas, if a migrant calls 911, that's our emergency, phone call here in the U.S. For anybody else, that goes to like the county, and then we have, government search and rescue organization, right? But if it's a migrant or it's suspected of being a migrant, that phone call gets rerouted to Border Patrol.
No way.
Border Patrol is an enforcement agency. They're not a, a rescue. But this is the, one of the first levels of deprioritizing. And then now, yes, this situation in New Mexico, which is very new for us. We've only been working in this area for 1 year. It's an incredible concentration of fatalities. An incredible percentage of deaths are women, over half. The average age is 29. Women and young girls as young as 16. And over 100 women found dead. These are only the ones that are found in less than 2 years. And we started working in this area, and immediately we were, the response and reaction was not good. They wouldn't go. They canceled the search. They came up with all these excuses. We can't find the location. We gave them everything they need, like more than anybody would give them. But that's just excuses. No, we're not going. We can't find it. We had to call the like consulate, like maybe the Mexican consulate and these different organizations and put pressure. But now, in the last 2 months, we have found 8 locations with significant remains. I'm not talking little bone fragments. I'm talking like the cranium, the jaw, dental, information,
Femurs.
the big leg bones, these big significant parts, right? And also identifications, cell phones, that are close with the body, some clothing. We have completed all these reports, August, September, October. We've called them in, we've emailed them in, like Abby said, and they just don't go. They are refusing to go. We've talked to some media. Some media has been interested and covered it a little bit. Some media went out. We showed them the situation. They did nothing. They put the footage on the shelf. Wow. What to do now, right? Like, this is a human rights violation, I believe, right? But you have this sheriff, this local sheriff, who is a woman, in fact, for whatever reason, will not go. They will not go. And it's a process in New Mexico. The sheriff has to go first, then they contact the medical investigator, and then they come in, do the recovery. So it's like this steps that have to take place. The sheriff is the first step. And they're coming up with all this crazy excuses, like they could be prehistoric. We think maybe they are prehistoric bones. They have fillings and cell phones and Adidas sweatpants. This battalion group is not truthful. They're giving us bad GPS points. What? We give 100% accurate GPS points. This is the latest one from the sheriff. Maybe this group is planting those bones there.
It's just appalling to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we are dealing with right now in this area. This like killing fields, this very deadly area where like over half are women and young girls. If you are a serial killer, come over here and you can kill people and maybe dump the bodies there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the sheriff will not come. This is the United States. This is happening in the United States right now.
Can I ask very quickly? So you were talking about authorities. how about locals in Arizona? How do they react to, for example, your work and people crossing? What are the feelings?
I think we get very good support.
Mm-hmm.
We get donations from people. They're grateful. We are not, part of the Hispanic community. We are gringos, as we say. But we get really good positive support. People we have presented in our community to like a church, to a civil liberties organization, and they are very supportive of us. They appreciate, they understand the situation, but I think so many of us feel powerless. Like how do you battle this, like this system, this killing machine, this death by design? Like we are even talking about now with this latest election, like I think we have to change. And with this sheriff that's not even recovering the remains that we report, like we have to change. We have to adapt. We have to like evolve. So yeah, sorry. Overall, I think good support.
What you're doing is really great, but if you were doing it in Greece, you would be in jail because the government here doesn't want anybody near refugees helping them. So I want to ask that now Trump is in power, do you think that the US government under his administration could make it illegal for you to do your job there and help people?
Go ahead. That's a tough one.
Yes. Yeah. In a word, yes. They can maybe make some fines, for going to this area where we're going, or just come up with something. Yeah.
It's public land. It's that we're on. It's state land. It's public land. We're not on private land, but that doesn't mean that they can't make that public land inaccessible to us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
we are doing work that is against the government's narrative. You see, the government wants to project this narrative of migrants are dangerous and they're bringing this crime and drugs, and the Border Patrol are heroic and they're defending our country and they're protecting us and stuff like that. And we don't find drugs and guns in the desert. We find Bibles. We find like love notes, children's homework, women's clothing. So by doing this work and communicating what we see, we are kind of going against this narrative and the plan. You see, this death by design plan. So when groups like us and these other groups, the Armadillos and other groups, are out searching and finding and reporting, this is not part of the plan. You are not, I believe our government is like thinking, no, leave them alone. Let the desert make this disappear, like your oceans, right? Please.
So this sheriff, I think, is sort of showing us the way that things could go wrong under Trump. And she's not saying this out loud, but the thinking is they're migrants. We don't have to. They're migrants. She says things like, well, we spend our time on a crime scene. But how do they know this isn't a crime scene? Because they haven't been out to pick up the remains. But I think their thinking is they're migrants. They took this risk. They should have known better. We're not going to address them. And then that comes back to this saying that I often hear people say, which is, well, they should have come across the legal way. And when they're challenged, they see there's really no legal way. There is no legal way. There's asylum, which it's very narrow and very few people can qualify for asylum. So then there's legal migration, which is this very long and complex and convoluted process that takes thousands of dollars, tens of years, and usually doesn't work. So are bringing that to awareness. And I don't think that folks want to be aware of that. They want to just say they should have come the legal way. They should know what they're getting into, and they don't want to address it.
Yeah. We aren't being responsible as Americans, as a country, right? We have created the push and the pull factors. We have sold this American dream. We have also inserted ourselves in their governments and destabilized their economies, affected their climates. We have done so much to push them, right, from their homes and pull them with this land of milk and honey and this, this American dream. But then we slam the door, and we don't manage this this flow. So we're just not taking responsibility, basically, and we want all this services and benefits from migrants and cheap labor and cheap products. We're a big spoiled country. We want things cheap, fast, and easy. Yeah, without all the complications. And so sorry.
No, exactly. I mean, this is the cynical way of the West, right? And Abby, to what you were saying, this is what is happening at the Polish-Belarusian border, that the place where people are crossing is actually a forest. It's our national forest, but still the government managed to implement some laws to forbid people from going there, and also, of course, targeting humanitarians who are going there with water and warm clothes for people, because it's a gigantic forest, it's very big, and they introduced an emergency zone where if you're not a local resident, and those are tiny villages, they are not cities, so if you're not a resident, you just cannot go there, and they just changing how big this emergency zone is. But even with the change of government from far right to central, this hasn't changed. The zone, even though challenged several times, is still being in place, and this is how they're stopping and basically giving fines to humanitarians predominantly, maybe just taking them to a police station for several hours, but this, stops them from assisting people that specific nights from bringing humanitarian aid. Yeah.
Wow.
Guys, I very quickly also would like to go back to policies and politics. Do you think, because you mentioned that it doesn't matter if it's Republicans or Democrats at power, the situation is not improving at the border. But I would like to ask you if some specific policies, like the Title 42, for example, if this changed anything. If so, I assume for worse. But if you could also explain to our European listeners and viewers what that policy was.
I don't got that one.
There were so many. Feel free to go deep into any of the policies that you think had impact.
So I think that the government, especially under Trump, they were using anything they could as a means to keep immigrants out. So they used the COVID and safety of the health of the American public as a means to keep them out. It's something that's similar, or it's a policy that's more recent. It was Biden's executive order that limited the amount of people that could apply for asylum by putting a cap on the number per day and making them use this phone application called CBP One app. And so what that has done is has kept people in Mexico, and they're not allowed to step onto U.S. soil to apply for asylum that they used to be able to do. And if they do that, they're pushed back over. And so they have to wait in Mexico, where they're really susceptible. They're living in shelters, in tent cities, waiting for an application. We work with these immigration lawyers. And my friend has a client who every day 9 o'clock when it opens every day. She goes on her app every day. Sounding boring? Every day. 9 months. No application. No appointment. 9 months.
And then by 9:01,
day after day. By 9:01, it's full. 9 months. And that's not atypical. This is normal. And so they have not increased the number of appointments. They are just forcing people to stay in Mexico with this policy. And so what happens? People have made it up to the border to apply for asylum. They give up. They're extorted. They're violated. And so they cross the border to come in a different way. And then we find them deceased because they're not prepared for this. It's the United States is not allowing people to apply for asylum. Something's terribly wrong with that.
There's like many policies. I can't keep track myself, remain in Mexico, Title 42, Biden's executive order, on and on and on. And they're all just these attempts they're like reactions, I feel, they're not thoughtful responses to migration. They're just these reactions, like the wall itself, it's just they're band-aids, and they don't serve the people, our country, the migrants themselves. Sorry, it's hard to keep track of them, but many of them are painful. Deadly.
Just as a conclusion, one person who was in our movie about deaths at sea, he was saying, in Europe, in Greece, actually you cannot claim asylum unless you fall from the sky, because there is no legal way to just like cross to Greece and say, like, at the border, this is the international law. You should be allowed to approach the border and ask for asylum there. And it's not happening.
Yes.
Even if there are land borders sometimes in Europe, you are dismissed. You are not allowed to do this. Your application is not being processed.
Same here.
We go into Mexico and, in some communities here along the border. And when we return, there is an agent, well before the desk, like if we are walking in, let's say, there's an agent well before that is checking, U.S. citizen, you have a passport, because the idea is that you should be able to come and present yourself. And so that's not even an option anymore. They have people there pushing people back, preventing them from just trying to enter to present themselves. So, wow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
James and Abby, thank you so much for being with us and, teaching people and informing them what's happening there. And if I ever make it to the US legally or illegally, I would be with you guys. I would join you there, to be honest. I fell in love with your mission, and who knows, maybe. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys and what you're doing. And, we do this work in the desert and we hike, and it's difficult work, and we manage our groups but we're not journalists, we're not, people that are, Abby's a writer,
not a journalist.
but so we're really grateful to folks like you to communicate, what's happening throughout, the world and in this issue. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lots of strength and energy to you guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.